Sugar. This is Tracer reporting on the latest from Boba Fett, the legendary bounty hunter who now seeks to become the godfather of Tatooine. Since Din Djarin disappeared in the aftermath of Gideon's capture and the completion of his quest, I have since been ordered to begin trailing Fett from a respectable distance. Aside from the sea of insurance claims we'll have to follow, Fett's efforts to claim Jabba's empire as his own will have serious political and economic ramifications on the rest of the Outer Rim, and if our intelligence is correct, may draw the eyes of other interested parties once the conflict widens. As such, I've taken up Ular Rusalor Morris's post, and I'm using all of his previous reportings to slowly craft a picture of Fett's activities since he was thrown into the Sarlacc. For that reason, I have chosen to split my report into sections, with the first being an up-to-date continuation of Morse's original report, and the second a growing report on what Fett was up to prior to his encounter with Din Djarin. I have brought in associate to help with this. I will discuss this later in my report. After killing Bib Fortuna and taking his throne for himself, Boba Fett has begun the process of establishing himself as the new crime lord of Tatooine. This process involved re-establishing Jabba's past relationships, extracting tribute, and cultivating new business deals. The first thing of note was the name change Boba seems to have enacted. Jabba and Bib Fortuna themselves were referred to as Sultans, a Hutt title taken from the ancient Arabic sources, and were effective heads of the Dishalak Hutt clan. While I suspect Bib was given this honor to carry on Jabba's activities on the planet, and was reflected by becoming grossly fat to imitate his former boss, Boba clearly has no desire to continue that relationship. Instead, Boba is referred to as a daimyo, a title I suspect may be taken from the Mandalorians and has its origins with the samurai clans of ancient Japan. The title distinction is important, as the Sultan ruled with such power garnered from local nobility and religious caliphates, reflected by Jabba's ties to its old clan. By comparison, daimyos were leaders of clans of warriors who held power in spite of the nobility, holding power through individual might rather than being given it. This can be reflected clearly in how Boba rules. First, he took power by killing the previous ruler who was too weak to hold it in the first place. Second, he broke away from Jabba's authority garnered through overabundance of fear, and is embracing a more Mandalorian-inspired rule through respect and mutual gain. Examples of this are his disdain for Hutt symbols of power, such as a reliance on torture and traveling via letters, and instead rewarding previous loyalty with employment and walking amongst the people. There is a great sense of political honor in Boba's dealings, most notably in choosing to spare the mayor of Mos Espa's messenger, rather than kicking him into a pit for insulting him and his staff.
This is Sparta!
However, Boba is still of two worlds. Despite his showing of Mandalorian honor, Boba murdered Bib Fortuna in cold blood, rather than giving him a chance to fight for his title. Still adorns himself like the ancient Egyptian pharaohs before him with robotic servants, and reigns in a palace as once a monastery. In fact, it's curious to see that the robotic priests that Jabba had allowed to stay are nowhere to be seen. While it could be the case that Bib Fortuna has removed them beforehand, the fact they have not returned is telling of Boba's attitudes toward them. This mixed approach to ruling has thus garnered him very mixed results so far. In choosing to respect his tributers, he has garnered the loyalty of some, but by not killing the mayor's messenger after the latter demanded tribute from Boba, it opened him up for an assassination. Boba's sparing of the Gamorreans likewise could have ended badly had he misjudged their character, but it was their efforts that saved his life, and while Boba is attempting to recapture Jabba's empire through honor and mutual benefit, he is still relying on his own fearsome reputation as a bounty hunter to ensure none dare challenge him. It is this reputation that has proved to be both his source of strength and yet his greatest weakness. Those that have submitted themselves to him do so because they know Fett personally, while those who don't have no great fear of him.
Anything goes wrong, then your reputation only gossip, and things between us not so solid. Yes?
For example, the messenger all but confirmed that there would be an attempt on Boba's life.
I would not be surprised if you received another delegation in the near future.
And yet, Boba did not properly act on this threat. This happens again later, when Boba visits a cantina in Mos Espa run by Garsa Flip. While sincerity of her claims of loyalty to Boba is still a matter to be seen, I find the circumstances of it and the later assassination attempt to be an interesting coincidence. In their meeting, Garza gives a veiled threat similar to the mayor's messenger.
Thank you for the gracious introduction and for making the long journey to visit our establishment. It is our little slice of paradise, and you are always welcome.
And then attempts to occupy Boba's Gamorrean bodyguards by having them washed and fed, followed by filling Boba and Fennec's helmets with, curiously, New Republic credits. Aside from this obviously preventing Boba from wearing his helmet, we know that the credit is not a largely valued currency anymore, with Din Djarin, for example, taking Mon Calamari currency over Imperial-issued credits, which is effectively what the New Republic's credits are replacing. Following this, Boba and Fennec are ambushed by a kill team trained, coordinated, and using shields and energy weapons. This indicates a great deal of planning and prep work, as the assassins were incredibly well disciplined in holding their phalanx, used weapons that were able to incapacitate Boba despite his armor, and Fennec despite her augmentations, engaging them at close range to prevent Boba from taking to the air, and their shields were able to take a point-blank rocket blast like it was nothing. These assassins were not run-of-the-mill thugs hired on a moment's notice. This ambush was planned and required precise timing to have the effect it did. Were it not for the Gamorreans, it is likely Fennec and Boba may have been either captured or killed. Speaking of which, the Gamorreans were late to the ambush and oddly hanged back in the moments leading up to it, and only intervened once the assassins were occupied with their targets. Why this happened, I'm still not sure, as the Gamorreans clearly are still loyal to Boba as they saved his life and got him to the Bacta chamber. Some other analysts have questioned Boba's effectiveness in this engagement, citing his previous combat superiority, especially when dealing with the stormtroopers. What these analysts fail to keep in mind is that Boba ambushed the stormtroopers at close range, where their combat effectiveness dropped off significantly, whereas these assassins did the same to him, and utilized weapons that stripped away much of Boba's advantages, including the space to use his jetpack. In addition to this, we know that Boba is still recovering from his injuries, requiring his Bacta chamber to sleep and heal. Considering how he looked previously when working with the Djarin, this recovery has greatly improved his health, but he is still nowhere near his former physical prime. I mean, he just grew back his eyebrows for Manda's sake. Following the Gamorreans' intervention, the assassins attempted to escape with Fennec, chasing them down in a parkour pursuit reminiscent of the members of the Assassin's Brotherhood. With their capture, it is possible that the perpetrators might be uncovered, but these were professionals, then I doubt they had direct contact. As for my own theories, the mayor of Mos Espa is the most likely candidate, as it was clear that he is attempting to build his own power base and would have the money to afford a hit. After all, Mos Espa seems to have significantly expanded under his reign, garnering a larger size, population, and economy, especially when we consider high-end spot droids from Boston Dynamics are in the hands of common citizens. However, according to his messenger, he was not in the city at the time. Garza may or may not be involved, as her visit coincided with the attempted hit, but there would be considerable risk if it failed. I should note, however, that she has garnered a significant chunk of Jabba's previous holdings, most notably his chief musician, Max Rebo. Which brings us to our last suspect, the Hutts. Bib Fortuna ruled as a proxy for them, and Boba's takeover of Jabba's empire is practically a declaration of war against them. They have the money and logistics to orchestrate a hit, but their presence thus far in current affairs has been unseen. While we wait until Boba recovers and to see what his next move will be, I've begun to dig into the years between Jabba's fall and Boba's reemergence. To this end, I have employed the services of a Tatooine local who has a greater degree of connections than I do. While I know that you, Alverde Smith, have strict policy regarding outside help, especially when employing smugglers, considering the state of Tatooine, I really had no choice. With no further ado, I give you the great Gonzalez.
That's right, T-Dog, step aside. Big Bad Gonzalez is going to take things over from here.
Sweet Mando, I'm gonna regret this.
Now, as you all know, the main Mando Boba Fett got knocked into the Sarlacc by a giant turkey with a stick. So sad. Now, from what I heard, Mr. Fett woke up inside the world. His air supply was used up, so he took some from a dead Imperial dog that somehow found his way in there. How? I have no clue. Perhaps he fell into the pit while looking for some droids. I don't know. Anyway, we found the Sarlacc weeks later, burnt to a crisp from the inside. Smelled of rotting bacon, if you ask me. Reminds me of a bit of an old awesome Hollow movie with the gangsters and the crazy chick with the sword. Dug her way out of a grave, just like my main Mando Boba Fett. Now, as you all know, the main Mando's armor was stolen by the Jawas. Stolen right off of his body as he lay cooking in the sun, and then found by a backwater sheriff in a shanty town in the middle of the desert. This is different from other reports where we heard that he blasted his way out of the Sarlacc, only to be found by the cyborg trooper himself, the legendary Dengar. Now, talking to some of the savages out yonder.
Tuskens, Gonzalez. They're Tuskens.
They are cracker boxes, is what they are. Anyhow, according to them, their tribe has found Boba and marched him all the way back to their camp. I have to say, the main Mando lives up to his reputation. I mean, he got burnt by the acid, got starved in the desert, forced to march on his hands and knees, and later beaten by the cracker boxes. Ooh, I don't even think the man is human. And that is why I think they spared him. They found him next to a dead Sarlacc and assumed he was a badass. Everything else was just figuring how much of one. And that brings me to the weirdness of this tribe. They are not like your typical cracker boxes. They wear all black, and their women do not even wear the armored burqa. So after, the main Mando gets the living odds beaten out of him by a chick I swear looks like Michonne. Filthy cracker box lady, good for you. So strong and independent, you beat up an old man whose blood was left burning in the desert. Anyhow, the chief's kid takes the main Mando and the snitching Rodian up to the homestead. Now the scum who attacked it bear the same symbols as the Red Key Raiders. The same folk who the sheriff annihilated with extreme prejudice. However, looking over y'all's report, they all appear to be dog-faced scum who got annihilated by the Mando himself and my main girl, the beautiful Cara Dune, ooh la la. Maybe these are some criminals, some mercs, I don't know, I do not care. But they raided the homestead, took the water, repeated the place all over, and beat the crap out of the guy owning it. They were probably hired as local muscle to send a message. After that, the main Mando and the Rodian were told by the punk kid that Boba beat up earlier to start digging for water seeds. Silly cracker box, water does not grow up from trees. Obviously, Boba had no luck, while the Rodian was picking them up like they were candy from a piñata. Makes me think those long fingers have some sort of sensors on them. Maybe that's why the Tusken keeps them around. Well, unfortunately for the snitch, he woke up a very nasty customer, which I swear came out of a very old movie. Seriously, I can't make up my mind what this is. Is this the Kraken's midget cousin? Or is this some freaking centaur? Or some relative of Goro? Or maybe some Martian who left Mars when John Carter took over? As for the monster, I have some thoughts about it. It was clearly a meat eater. I'm thinking those teeth that Mr. Fett was digging for was what the man has been eating. So it hides there and kills whatever it stumbles upon. Cause I remember though, it didn't try eating everybody there. It just passed them around a little. So maybe this was a territorial thing. And you picked up a wrong day to catch it napping.
You picked the wrong house, fool!
Hey! Well, catch it napping they did, and Mr. Fett strangled it like the only chick in outer space did to Jabba. There's some symbolism there, I suppose. From Mr. Fett making a deal with the punk kid, and the kid taking credit for the kill, while Boba was set free. Instead of walking away, the main Mando decided to come back, where the punk kid's dad smelled the nerve logic about the whole thing. Very subtly gave Boba a seat to drink. Reading T-Dog's report from earlier, we know these Tuskens do this as a sign of friendship, like they did with the sheriff. So I suppose Boba's in the tribe now. I mean, he has to be. He's wearing their colors.
That brings me to the last observation I made. The report from the locals regarding this instance was titled Stranger in a Strange Land, which I found are references to two things. The first is an ancient human religious text found in Exodus 2:22, which reads, "And she bare him a son, and he called him Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land." This is a prelude to the story of Moses, who was exiled from Egypt and taken in by the Bedouin. After spending some time with them and changing as a man, Moses would return to Egypt to deliver his people from slavery. In the case of Boba, this fits to a T. He's been exiled from his way of life, taken in by the Sand People, and is thus changed as a man because of it, all to eventually return to his homeland to reclaim what is his. Gee, I think that's called character growth, don't you think? The second reference is to a novel of the same name by Robert Heinlein, most known for Starship Troopers, who saw a man marooned on Mars and be taken in by savage Martians. We have enough Egyptian and Martian influences to boot, so you decide. With that, I conclude this report and await further events. Retorche me, VOD, out.